Name's Matt Mitler. I wrote this book, Kaufman's Holiday, and I'm gonna be reading from it. It's serialized, so don't go holding your breath for the denouement. Oh, and the program, in case you're wondering, well, this is Sunday Night Noir. And now, Kaufman's Holiday, Part 1, Pagan Rites, Chapter 1. Kaufman tipped back the hat on his head. Never wear your fedora straight. Makes you look like a kike, and slumped onto the counter. He sat in his usual spot and nursed a vodka. Gin was for goys, and besides, it was too obvious. The place was vacant, save for him and the bartender, Sully, a lumbering ox with coarse red hair that swept up from his back, but came to a halt before servicing his Neanderthal skull. Sully squeezed a breath into his lungs, picked up a dingy dish towel, and glanced in Kaufman's direction. "Thought you was on the wagon, Mo," he wheezed. "Only when I'm working," said Kaufman. "Right now, I'm on holiday." "You people's always got a holiday." Sully wiped at a milky ring on the countertop. Kaufman cupped his chin and let his palm ride up over some well-earned stubble. "Well, everybody'll be on holiday once Johnny comes marching home." "What? You ain't got no patriotism?" "Oh, I got something. Don't quite know if it's patriotism." Kaufman worked out a crick in his neck. "Them boys done did good. They'll do the same for them Japs. Sorry I couldn't have played my part." Sully neatly folded a towel and looked around for an appropriate place to stuff it. "You're not the only 4F around here, Sully." "Pretty ironical, Mo. Gotta appreciate that." Sully was still looking. He hung the rag from his apron. "Oh, I appreciate irony wherever I can find it." Kaufman raised his glass. "Here's to victory, Sully." But the glass was empty. Sully poured a shot for himself, set it up beside Kaufman's, and filled them both to the brim. "To victory!" Sully downed his drink and faded off behind the counter. Kaufman closed his eyes and followed the juice. It burned down his throat, across his chest, and coursed through his veins. Victory. Night. It was always night at Sully's Tavern, even now with a rusty ribbon rising over the city's edge, the time when vampires settle back in their coffins. He looked down into his glass for an answer to an unspecified question. Had to stop reading pulp. Rots your brain. "Kaufman? Moses Kaufman?" And now he was hearing voices. Dames never set foot in Sully's. "Mr. Kaufman, I need to speak with you." He continued to fathom his drink. The holiday was coming to an end. Bottoms up. He wiped his mouth with his cuff and spun around. Swallowed her whole. Smooth skin, flaxen locks, no hat. White rayon scarf looped about a pale, slender neck. Tan spring raincoat over the shoulders. Maroon cardigan snug on a fitted frame. Tartan skirt. Slouch socks. Tennis shoes. "Your lace is untied." She blinked, waiting for some valiant act of chivalry, perhaps. But Kaufman's youth was spent. He wore his malaise-like patina on tarnished silver. He glanced down at the laces. She hopped on a bar stool and formed a hasty double knot. "You are Kaufman, aren't you?" she asked. Kaufman shot a look to Sully, who'd also been contemplating the laces, and what went with them. Sully shrugged his fatty shoulders and ambled away.
Mr. Kaufman, I really need your help.
Her voice dropped an octave. There was a catch in it now. Listen, kid, if you're looking for a PI, there'll be a whole army of them hanging up their shingles soon enough.
I need you, Mr. Kaufman.
The catch was catching. Her dimpled chin angled up, gave her a pious Puritan edge. But her eyes were ringed, and in their centers was a sadness that diffused the cocky, parochial upbringing. She was easy enough to look at, long lashes, soft lips, sexy, if you liked your birds hatched straight off the playground, which he didn't, not his cup of vodka. But he did feel something stir. No, not that. It was the need to help. The need to help those who needed help, even if it meant trouble. And this time, he knew it meant trouble. He could feel it in his kishkas. He shouldn't let the conversation go any further. He shouldn't just sit there, set up for a sucker punch. He shouldn't even get her name.
My name's Mara.
Might as well start digging his grave.
Mara Walsh.
One nail in the coffin lid.
You probably know my family from Newport?
Another nail. Of course he knew her family. Everyone did. And now he knew what she was here for. It was the talk of the town. Cliff Walk tragedy for hero's homecoming.
Patrick was my brother, she continued.
Sorry, Kaufman said. He looked across the bar and examined his blurred reflection in the mirror. Already the booze was losing its edge. He began to come into focus. A history of past lives mapped his mug with scars. Under the chin, outside corner of the right eye, side of the neck, and a real butte that snaked its way up from the left eyebrow and slithered into the slick gray of his receding hairline. He shifted to the girl in the reflection. She bit her lower lip, glanced around the room, and caught Sully, bug-eyed, balancing against a broom. Sully shuffled off into the shadows. She closed in on Kaufman. He held the empty shot glass tight in his hand, turned to face her. It was all over. The eyes trapped him. They reached into his sockets and grabbed him by the back of the tongue. He tried to swallow. Couldn't. Most of Kaufman's cases were negligible. Chasing down a loan payment, spying on a wayward wife. None were worth the cost of newsprint. And none carried more baggage than For Walsh had just lugged in.
I think he was murdered.
Her legs began to tremble, and she clenched her skirt, holding her knees in place. She took a series of choppy breaths and coughed up the rest.
By my father.
One more nail. The lid was sealed. And Kaufman was 6 feet under, with no one to say Kaddish. Chapter 2. They stepped out onto Water Street. Kaufman hadn't noticed the rain. That was the point of Sully's, not to notice anything. Now here he was, chaperoning some frightened frail along the cobblestones. Gray dawn hovering, tugboats creaking in the surf. He wanted to ditch her. He wanted to put his arm around her and comfort her. He wanted another drink. Your brother's case is closed. Newport Blues filed it away.
The local cops are crooked, Mr. Kaufman. You know that. That's why I'm here.
And that's why I'm in Providence.
And that's why it's taken me a week to hunt you down.
Her steps were faster than his, and she kept turning around to make sure he was still there. He was. Hands plunged into the pockets of his overcoat. Hat pulled down against the damp. She had her coat sashed, but Kaufman could tell it wasn't enough. "We'll stop by my office and get you something warm to drink." He was already reviewing the Walsh case in his head, at least the case as he'd read it in the journal. Decorated war hero, Yankee liberator, Newport's own. Only son of Clayton Walsh, a Mick John Jacob Astor III. Report was that the champ had taken a swan dive from the balcony of Daddy's dream house during his own homecoming party. Kid was a notorious booze hound, got into the giggle juice, took a tumble. He was also a wretched Jew-hater. That part wasn't in the press. But Newport was a small town, a town Kaufman knew more about than he wanted to. High society anti-Semitism abounded, even if it was cloaked under a black tie. Just look at Lindbergh. But what about the girl? Where did she fit in? Sappy sister seeks solace. She didn't seem like one of the Walsh clan, or any clan for that matter. He watched the steam wisp from her parted lips. She tossed a lock of hair off her forehead and shot a look at him. He stopped walking. "You're going to have to tell me everything, all right?" She squared off, nodded. "And you might not like what I find." She met him dead on. "And it's going to cost you $200 a week, plus expenses." No flinching. She turned to watch a trawler setting off into the fog. Kaufman thought he spied a smile on her face, but wasn't sure. "Hope you'll settle for tea. My secretary makes the coffee, and I'm currently out of secretaries." He opened the door. M. Kaufman, private investigator. Neatly stenciled in black and gold on an opaque pane. Wooden blinds held back the day, but slivers of light cut through, slicing diagonally into the room. Kaufman flipped on a corner lamp with a yellowed shade. A mahogany desk dominated, the surface prepped for some archaeological dig, no doubt. Along one wall was an overstuffed bookcase. On the opposite wall was a lousy watercolor of Newport's old stone mill. Beside it hung a few framed photos. All the pictures were cockeyed. Below them was a well-worn mohair sofa with a tousled quilt laid out. He pitched his hat and coat. "Take your slicker?" Mara peeled off the Mac. She might be a kid, but from behind you could be fooled. Kaufman spun away, dangled the garment from a coat rack, and crossed the room. A corner cabinet housed a small electric plate. He plugged it in, picked up a copper kettle, shook it, and placed it on the grill. She took a detour around the desk, eyeballing the room. Kaufman hovered over the kettle and sucked on his lower lip. "What's this?" She held up an embroidered pillow. 2 letters, J and H, and underneath, forever. "My ma made it for my pop. An anniversary gift." He took the pillow from her and tossed it back on the chair. "So your parents, they're..." The kettle screamed. "Dead. Yeah." Kaufman went over and unplugged the hot plate. He snatched a couple of glasses and a tin from the top shelf, lumped a heaping spoon of black leaves into the bottom of the glass, and poured hot water on top. "We're not rationing sugar here, so help yourself." "Thank you," she said, and settled herself into a crusty leather chair. She pointed to one of the photographs. "Is that you?" A shot of 2 young boys in yarmulkes and prayer shawls. Kaufman let out a slow breath. "Me and my kid brother, his bar mitzvah." "And there?" Another print. Kaufman, doing a handstand at Easton Beach, with a tan gal and a polka-dotted one-piece off to the side. "Who's the kitten?" she asked, arching a slim eyebrow. Kaufman handed the girl her tea with a spoon and placed a tiny bowl of sugar cubes on the corner of the desk. Just to set things straight, Miss Walsh, it's your story here that matters. Mine's irrelevant. He held his glass by the rim, inhaled the steam, and narrowed his eyes. Then he circled the desk and sat squarely on the monogram cushion. So, let's start with the prologue, he said, and took a swig. Chapter 3. By the time Mora left his office, it was already well past 10. He considered the leaves stagnating at the bottom of the glass. Then he thumbed the wad of bills, neatly stacked, 20 dispassionate Jacksons, and twanged the band that bound them. 1 week, paid in advance, plus double that for expenses. She was nothing if not prepared. He tossed the scratch onto his desk, got up, and stretched his spine, pried apart some slats over the window and peeked out, squinting. Crummy view, but at least you could glimpse a scrap of river. The sun glanced off its surface. He let the blind drop, wincing, looked back over at the cash, sat on the edge of his desk, and picked up the phone. Operator, get me Rosewood 95395. A trebly voice crackled over the line.
Goldstein here.
Hey, Goldie.
Whatever it is, Moishe, I can't do it.
What, you think I want a favor? Kaufman pushed some old mail together into a taller, neater pile. Got something for you.
A headache? Angina? Where's this going?
Shut up and listen to where it starts. Mora Walsh.
Newport Walsh?
That's the tune.
Didn't know you cozied up to Cliffwalk. My people ain't invited to that dance.
I didn't hustle this one, Goldie. It fell in my lap.
Mora Walsh came to Providence to retain a kike P.I. Sounds loony.
100 for your trouble, and I'll throw in a kosher dog.
It's about the brother, right?
No yapping. You in or out?
Course I'm in. Mora Walsh. That's some duchess for you. Better get yourself a 9-iron and a silk hanky.
Just meet me at Point Street Bridge. Noon.
I'll wear my Easter bonnet so's you'll recognize me.
Kaufman got off the desk, snapped up his coat and hat, and bolted out the door. He'd have just enough time for a shave and a haircut, and get himself a nice suit. Can't enter society looking like a schlub. Chapter 4. Goldstein was already waiting, balanced on the rail of the bridge. He wore a navy blue suit with a gaudy rayon tie with a giraffe print on it and no hat. He held a nickel bag of pistachios, and his fingers were smeared red.
Nice threads. You could almost pass.
He gave Kaufman an appreciative nod. Kaufman creased his lapels. 35 smackers, cherry and web. He climbed up on the railing and settled himself next to Goldstein. They sat for a moment, looking down into the Providence River.
So, what's she like?
Asked Goldstein. Who?
The shiksa, little Miss Walsh.
She's all right.
Plain or polished?
No veneer, Goldie, if that's what you mean. Plays the clean-cut college kid.
Built?
She's no Bess Meyerson, but she'd squeeze a whistle out of you, I suppose. Goldstein let a handful of shells fall, watched as they floated away with the current. Kaufman snatched the bag and took a handful for himself.
You gonna give me the setup?
Goldstein licked his fingers. You people are so damn pushy. Kaufman popped a nut in his mouth, chomped it. So, Patrick Walsh comes home, right?
Right. Purple Heart and all.
And he's cracked his think shell, got his noggin in a cheesecloth.
Can only be an improvement.
But did he get clonked by some kraut? Seems he never talked about what happened in Germany. No one's talked. Mara says the metal was pushed through and pinned to his Jew-hating chest before you could say Kilroy was here. So now he's back in Newport, and Pops throws a big black tie for him. Swing band, Clams Casino. Who's gonna miss this bash?
Besides Yids and Schweitzers?
You put out the call, anybody who's anybody, and let 'em jazz it up.
Especially G.I. Walsh.
Especially G.I. Walsh. Next thing you know, our bugle boy's up on the veranda. A potted pope sprinkling holy water.
Deo gratias.
And then he takes the plunge. Party poops out. Clayton calls the cops. The bum's mopped up and crated. Buried at Arlington.
So he was loaded and took a Tita.
Kaufman hopped down and stood in front of the iron rail. The balustrade at the Walshes comes up almost 4 feet. Patrick's 6'1". Even with soppy knees, the bar's above his waist. How's he gonna fall?
You got these stats from the girl.
Kaufman nodded. But it's my algorithm. I didn't clue her in. And ready for this. No one was allowed upstairs besides Patty's chums, family, and the staff.
Could have been any of them. The punk was an embarrassment. Now he gets a 21-gun salute.
She says it's Clayton, the father, but that I don't buy.
She is lining your pocket, Mo.
If I start going by what some tomato tells me, I might as well throw myself over a ledge. Kaufman peered into the bag, pulled out another nut. Her money might be legit, but I can't attest to the rest of her. That'll be your dig, Goldie. She's going to be greasing my palm. I need to know what brand of butter she buys. Goldstein pulled a toothpick out of a small silver case and worked it between his protruding teeth.
Why you?
If Patrick's no hero, and worse yet, an anti-Semitic schmuck, then who the hell else is going to want to play this game?
The matzo ball's been tossed. Guess you're the only schlemiel on the team to catch it.
Kaufman spit a shell into the breeze. I'm the only schlemiel, period. There is no team.
Huh, what am I? Pickled herring?
You're not even in the ballpark on this one, Goldie. Kaufman produced a crisp C-note, held it aloft out of Goldstein's reach. No one knows you, and it stays that way. Get it?
I got it.
Goldstein jumped up and snatched the Franklin. And you don't set foot in Newport, continued Kaufman.
Then how am I supposed to get dirt on the girl?
Goldstein inspected the bill, made sure both sides were inked. You'll find a way. I'll check in with you at the end of the week. Goldstein folded the note 4 times and tucked it inside his jacket pocket.
Newport. Been some time.
Been enough time.
You sure?
No, but it's not going to put a skip in my groove. Kaufman straightened his hat. Time to get to work. Goldstein gazed up, big olive eyes. What? Kaufman asked. Goldstein scrunched his shoulders and opened his palms.
You promised me a kosher dog.
Chapter 5. Kaufman caught the train out of Fox Point early the next morning, then took the ferry to Jamestown and over to Newport. He stopped on the dock, grabbed an egg and sausage sandwich at a Portuguese hash house, and headed up Thames Street to Mill and over to the Redwood Library. How long had it been? 2 years? 3? His steps were slowing down, a load of past dragging on his heels. His stomach churned. Shouldn't have had the chorizo. Truro Park was a stone's throw from the library, a slight detour. He hadn't even made the decision. His feet just took him there. Winding paths, honeysuckle bushes, a tall pine in the center. Behind the tree was the old stone mill, built by Vikings, they say. Funny that a pagan shrine would be a block away from a synagogue. He tipped his hat to the mill and redirected himself towards the library. The redwood out in the front lawn still held court. He ran a hand over the burgundy skin, walked down the slate path up to the portico, and pushed open the thick oak door. Silence. A plump librarian peered at him over a copy of Life magazine. He removed his hat. She blushed and ducked back down. He went over to the periodicals. Newport Daily News. Best to start with the society sections. The party was set for Saturday, May 19th. About 3 weeks past Der Führer's finale. 8 days before Mara's waltz into Sully's tavern. In the May 18th edition, Kaufman found a typically ostentatious announcement, complete with smirking mugshot. Hurrah for a hero. Tomorrow evening we'll offer an affair for a returning hero, unlikely to be surpassed anywhere across this great nation of ours. For this celebration honors one of Newport's own. Patrick C. Walsh has returned after medical treatment at the 121st Evacuation Hospital and is back home, successfully recuperating at Horizon House, the estate of magnate and proud father Clayton Everett Walsh on Ochre Point Avenue. The brave soldier suffered a serious head wound while liberating Camp Dora Mittelbau in Nordhausen, Germany on April 11th, and has been awarded a Purple Heart for the injury he suffered at the hands of the deadly enemy. Clayton Walsh has had his share of suffering in years past, with the death of his beloved wife, Gloria, on December 20th, 1939. To have his son back by his side will certainly be a great blessing. Daughter Maura Walsh will return as well on summer break from studies at Mount Holyoke College, where she is majoring in sociology. Also due to attend will be Jane Pickens, Martha and Maxim Karolik, Gloria Vanderbilt and her new hubby Leopold, Doris Duke, Van Johnson, and Eleanor Robson Belmont. Music will be provided by Les Brown and his band of renown, featuring the vivacious young vocalist Doris Day. The affair is private. Admission is by invitation only. Nifty. Now for May 20th. Kaufman flipped through. There was the same grinning portrait, only scaled down in size. Under it, a brief announcement. Tragedy at Ochre Point. Decorated war hero Patrick C. Walsh fell to his death from the garden balcony of the estate of his father, Clayton Walsh, late last night. The calamity occurred a little after midnight, on the eve of what had been a most festive celebration of Patrick's return from the war in Europe. The party was brought to an abrupt halt. Local police deemed the incident a most unfortunate accident. PFC Walsh was 23 years old. He had served in the 104th Infantry Division as part of the U.S. VII Corps. He will be buried in Arlington Cemetery with full honors. Funeral arrangements are currently underway. Les Brown debuted a new tune at the soiree, sweetly sung by the adorable Doris Day. Sure to be a hit, may the song Sentimental Journey guide young Patrick all the way to his new home in heaven. Kaufman folded the rag and put it away, straightened his tie, and sauntered over to the librarian's desk. "Excuse me, miss." She looked up. Teal-blue utility dress tight on an ample frame, smile wide. What soldier was she waiting for? maybe no one. I'm doing a feature on Patrick Walsh for a glossy.
Oh, which one?
Yeah, she was alone all right. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to say, but I'm sure it's one you'd like to have a look at.
Look?
He hated easy marks. Really can't say, miss, but I've hit a snag and could sure use some help. Kaufman hovered over his assistant as she wriggled her backside, deftly thumbing through one daily news after another. So, tell me...
Charlene. My name's Charlene.
Tell me, Charlene, you ever meet Pat Walsh?
Oh, no, I'm just a small-town girl.
What, no one ever took you to a swing fest at the Breakers?
I wish. No, I'm lucky to catch a matinee at the Strand.
Too bad I'm only around for the day. You'd be surprised where a press pass can get you. She shimmied some more. He could almost hear maracas accompanying her. If he had a minion, they could form a conga line.
Well, you'll just have to come back some other time.
She stood up and turned around, waited for his volley. But he didn't have one. Her ruby mouth went slack. She held out the paper.
I think this is the issue you're waiting for.
Thanks, doll. Maybe I'll put in a bid to cover the America's Cup when it returns. Right now, I got a deadline. He gave her a wink and an ounce of hope and walked away with the newsprint under his arm. Smooth. 80 proof. Wednesday, June 13th, 1944. Off to defend democracy. The quintet of comrades who call themselves the Patriots are heading off to war. Patrick Walsh, son of Clayton Walsh. Johnny Reed, James Fry, of Fry and Sons Hardware, Bradley Glenn, and Robert Richards have enlisted in the armed forces and are ready for basic training. Patrick and Bradley will be entering the Army, while James, Robert, and Johnny have all enlisted in the Navy. Young Mr. Reed intends to become a fighter pilot, just like his dad, Captain Jack Reed, who's currently on his 4th tour of duty. The pals' pact to enter the service together came after graduation from Rhode Island State College, which they had all attended. Now they've cut short their summer of sun and fun and are risking it all for the good fight. Newport's young soldiers have been friends since childhood. We wish them all Godspeed on their mission, and may they return safe, sound, and victorious. Nice photo to go along with this nugget. The 5 lads decked out in formal wear, each with a stogie in his maw. Patrick commanding center stage, his bow tie dangling. Even in black and white, Kaufman could spot the flush on his face. Fry's eyes were squinty little slits. Richards had the smirk of a guy who'd banged every broad along Bailey's Beach. Bradley Glenn was the only one who'd actually looked like he was going into battle, but he still managed to flash his whites for the birdie. And then there was little Johnny Reed, kneeling down front, thumbs up with one hand, silver lighter ignited the other. Cocksure and ready for action, already carving notches on his belt. Kaufman hated every one of them. Privilege. Off to fight like it was some fraternity prank. Well, there had to be some life after football, but there'd be no cheerleaders spread-eagled on this turf, no beers upended in the locker room. Would war sober them up? He checked to see that he was still under cover, pulled out a penknife and carefully sliced the picture out of the paper. He was just about to fold it in half and slip it into his jacket pocket when his pulse jerked. He looked at the photo again. Reed. the lighter. A silver lighter. The flame flared up, exploded in Kaufman's face. Phantoms could be so damn persistent. There they were, the two of them entwined, a blackened pretzel. He closed his eyes and tried a change of scenery. Easton Beach. He knew he shouldn't return there, but without a taste, it was the only respite from burnt offerings. The girl loomed like foam on the surf, standing on the bluff, sun outlining her perfect curves. He could almost touch her. She seemed so close here, where she belonged, unscarred. Back in Newport, back with the other cadavers. There were cases that begged to be solved. There were cases that begged to be forgotten. He looked up and scanned the towering shelves. Somewhere up there, Dante was taking a detour through hell. And somewhere down here, Kaufman was about to make a very similar turn. Chapter 6. He returned the paper to Charlene with a smile and a "see you around," walked out the library, and kept walking. Couldn't get caught up in Reed's flinted amulet right now. $1 get you one just like it at any tobacco shop. 20 cents, and you could have it monogrammed. He crossed Turo Park and the Old Stone Mill, and in a couple of blocks was back on Thames. His floorchimes clacked the cobblestones as he passed by run-down seafood shacks and schooners. Old coots with names like Cap'n Jim and Stubby baking in the sun, toothless gums flapping nonsense. A gull flew overhead. He watched it glide along with the breeze, then swoop down into the harbor and neatly snatch a perch. The fish wriggled in the gull's bill as it flew away. Kaufman found himself at Lee's Wharf, staring at a shanty at the edge of the dock. The slip knot seemed barely attached, like the next wave might knock it off the landing and cast it adrift. He stepped inside and inhaled a waft of stale beer and steamers. A grizzled sailor stood behind the bar in a frayed A-shirt, blue tattoos fading into his leathery skin. He chewed on the end of a wooden cocktail stirrer and peered at Kaufman through deadened eyes. The new suit was no longer quite so fashionable. A musty fishing net hung over the guy's head. Kaufman could picture him yanking it down, bagging him, and whacking him with a club to sell his summer white hide. "What'll it be, bub?" Kaufman half expected him to say matey. "Seltzer, and a slice of lime." He faced the bartender, ready to take his licks or dish it back, whatever Neptune willed. "That'll be a nickel." He spat out the stirrer and hoisted a bottle from below the counter, never taking his eyes off Kaufman. Gave a squirt into a grimy glass. "Here's 2 bits. Keep 'em coming." Kaufman slapped the coins on the counter. Barnacle Bill smiled, flashing 2 gold teeth. So, looked like Kaufman would have clear sailing after all, though he wouldn't have minded a minor squall. Had sort of looked forward to it. He held the glass to his lips, tried to imagine it was the real thing. Couldn't, but downed it anyway. "You're in the wrong spot for somebody who's trying to stay sober." But he was the one who was wrong. Kaufman was in the perfect spot. The place nauseated him. He looked around. One patron passed out on a checkerboard, another mumbling to himself, staring out a smeary porthole. "Guy's gotta find company somewhere," he said. "You ain't gonna find none here." "Now what makes you say that?" Kaufman motioned to the clown by the window. Fellow seems to be quite the conversationalist. If you likes your talk shell-shocked. Kaufman laid down his gloves. He a vet? That's what I hear. Folks owns a hardware store. They pay his tab. No one floats in the slipknot. No one floats. But right now, someone was sky high. Fry and Sons? Kaufman asked. Yeah, he's fried alrighty. Kaufman snapped out a single. What's he drinking? Kaufman offered the sap another round, though if his tongue had been any looser it would have fallen out of his mouth. Fry's eyes drooped, yellow and bloodshot. The scruff around his chin was caked with dried sputum. The Newport Navy tee he wore over his bloated torso had become translucent with body filth. The kid had come home, half of whatever he'd been before he left, which probably wasn't much to begin with, and had cozied himself up at the Slipknot. This was one son of Fry who wouldn't be going into the family business. Kaufman! Fry rubbed a fat palm over his rubbery face, curled his lip. That's a Jew name, ain't it? A screw tightened in Kaufman's neck, but his expression remained fixed. So, you hung out with Walsh the whole week then? He was busy. Family stuff. Fry finished his shot. Took me out for a steak once, and that's all they did. Him and Glenn? Yeah, Bradley Glenn. He's always with him. Kiss ass. Richards? Reed? Richards is still out in the Pacific. The war ain't over, in case you didn't know. But it's over for Reed. He's at St. Joe's drinking through a tube in his arm. Kaufman held up a finger, signaling for the barman. So much for the Patriots, he said, feigning sympathy. Patriots were over the day we signed up. Guess it seemed like the right thing at the time. Old man Walsh put the squeeze on Pat. We just went along for the ride. Thought you were in it for God and country. You don't know crap, Dick. The barman brought Fry another drink. The lunk hunched over and examined the leveled shot in his hand, amber fluid sloshing over the edge. Kaufman had been there himself. Often. He wanted to smack the drink out of the punk's hand, drag him away from this stinkhole and plunge his head in the surf. Wake up, he wanted to shout. But the kid was spilling more than his bourbon, and somebody needed to sop it up. So, last time you saw Patrick was at the party? Didn't go. Couldn't find my cummerbund. He arched his back and patted his gut. Kaufman noticed a sheathed dagger clipped to his belt. Leather grip with black steel rings. K-bar. Military issue. Missed quite a night. Fry squinted at Kaufman. You don't come home just to die accidentally. It ain't right. He died a hero. Then we's all heroes. Screw us all. He kicked back the juice. Give me a stick, he slurred. Don't smoke, Kaufman said flatly. Fry squirmed around, fished a crumpled pack of Chesterfields from his pants pocket and tapped out one remaining butt. Screwed it into his swollen lips. Then he dug in and yanked out a silver lighter. It was engraved. Nice Zippo, Kaufman said warily. Ain't no zip. It's sterling from Patty. A present. Fry pushed it into Kaufman's face. That's Latin there. Jews will understand. Means blood brothers. Kaufman knew what it meant all right, and it hit him like an uppercut. But he needed to keep focused. He held onto the table with both hands and watched as Fry flashed the lighter and inhaled greedily. "So Patrick wasn't a hero?" Kaufman finally asked, coming up off the mat. "Like, you know, a hero. Hey, I was fighting, damn it. I was fighting Japs, and then was fighting back. And then some slant-eyed shitter nosed us. Kamikaze fuck. Blew himself and half deckhands to pieces." He almost got weepy. "I tell you, guts look exactly the same whether they are Army, Navy, Polak, or Jew," Kaufman sneered. "Ha!" Fry sputtered, spittle littering the table. "You Jews don't have any guts. Come crying to Uncle Sam for help. Where's your ribbon, soldier boy?" A smile drooled from his smug face. Bile shot up. Kaufman spat it out. "I don't know. Where's your sailor?" he hissed. "Giving me flack? You sodden sorry-ass discharge. You went down before you even saw action. You signed up with a pint under your belt and kept slogging it back through your whole tour of duty. Navy doesn't want you, or Uncle Sam. Sent you packing before you hurt your own. Seems old man Fry doesn't have much use for you either. Why should he? You're a pathetic slob. So he runs a tab for embalming fluid till your meter time's out. That way you're pickled and ready for canning. Now that's thinking like a Jew." Jimmy Fry's tiny black eyes glared at Kaufman. He held the empty shot in his fist and squeezed it tight, then squeezed tighter. The glass shattered, and blood dripped from his lacerated palm. But he didn't look away. He just started to cry. Chapter 7. The blast of sunlight sent him reeling. Worse than siphoning amnesia in some putrid cesspool was watching somebody else do it. But it was more than Fry's blubbery, rotten life that Kaufman had to escape. The lighter had obliterated any sense of accomplishment. He spit off the dock. Surf sloshed up against the slimy green pylons. A Pepsi bottle floated on its side, rocking back and forth in the froth. Kaufman could probably grind some more out of Fry, but what would be the point? He'd got what he came for, and a little bit more. Next up was Bradley Glenn. Johnny Ree would have to wait till he got back to Providence. Robert Richards, he could scratch that name off the list. For this case, at least. He wandered up Dearborn to Perry, walked by a shingled two-story with a carousel horse bolted to the front porch. Black, with nostrils flared, fiery eyes, front hooves raised in a frozen gallop. He continued back over to Bellevue, past the creamery, and decided to pop in for grilled cheese. His stomach was starting to grumble, and he needed time to digest the last couple of hours. He parked himself on a vinyl stool at the counter. A skinny old geet with bony joints and arms that dangled by his sides took his order. With his peaked paper hat, droopy eyes, and a nose that bent down over his upper lip, he resembled a pelican. Kaufman might look like that himself someday, if he lived so long. The two acknowledged each other wanly, a silent affirmation. The waiter's beak nodded, and he turned and tottered away without ruffling a feather. Kaufman looked around. Pink and white stripes, and paintings of high-buttoned Gibson girls. A straw boater could have suited him as well as a wool felt. A bow tie, perhaps. Seersucker suit. He could have played his ukulele and sung Yiddish ditties in a warbly falsetto. women would have blushed and fanned themselves. He was gearing up for a high-stakes croquet match when the pelican returned with an oval plate and placed it before him. A feast. White bread, golden brown with butter, crisp pickle snugly fitted to the side. He pulled apart the two halves of the sandwich and let the white cheese sag in a slack hammock, placed one half back on the plate, and held the other up to his lips, preparing to savor every bite. I guess we'll call it quits for now. So, this was the first episode of Sunday Night Noir, here on Radio Free Brooklyn. Kaufman's Holiday, chapters 1 through 7. Hope you thought it was hep. Our theme music, Case Closed, was composed by Chris Durian and features Brian Schwartz on trumpet and Sang-Hee Cho on piano. Oh, and the piano tinklings sprinkled throughout this program? Those were created by my dear old friend and musical genius, Arthur Rosen. I'd like to thank my wife, Karen Hatt, for always lending an expert eye and ear and keeping me on the straight and narrow. And all the swells at Radio Free Brooklyn, especially Robert Pritchard, who's been a pal of mine since Fakakta High School. This is Matt Mitler signing off, but I'll be back. You'll hear me coming, my floor chimes clacking on the cobblestones.